Hello, librarian Alex with a new book. Now this story I'm going to say today is for year 5s and 6s, or anyone older, but anyone who's under 8, bye, because this story's not for you. I found this book on my bookshelf and I have no idea where it came from, where I got it, but it's the most beautiful book. Look at it. It's got a purple opaque hardback cover, and then the illustration of a tiger is in this beautiful gold, shiny gold print. And it's called The Tiger Boy by Ted Hughes. Now you may have heard of Ted Hughes because a lot of you have read The Iron Man at school. And you'll know that's a peculiar story, and this is another odd tale. And we've got some illustrations in this book as well by Joe McLaren. They look like they're woodcuts to me. So this front cover picture of the tiger is probably a woodcut. I'm just going to jump straight in. Tiger Boy by Ted Hughes. There was a boy. Nothing peculiar about him. His name was ordinary too, Fred. Nobody noticed him. In his gang of friends, he looked just like the others. At home, where he was the middle of the family of 5 children, he mixed in unnoticeably with the rest. He ate whatever was given. Only Fred knew he was different. As he went about doing what everybody else did, he had this idea all the time that he was different. He was special. But he never did anything different. He slept in a room with his 2 brothers. He had the same toys as them. They had rabbits, and he had a rabbit. They sailed boats, and he sailed a boat. They made model airplanes, and so did he. When his elder brother brought in comics, they all read them. When his brothers went fishing, he went with them and caught fish. When they went to the woods, he went to the woods. When they went to school, he went to school. Only at night sometimes he lay awake after they'd gone to sleep. How was it he was here? In this strange thing of a body that ended at his toes and his fingers and his hair. What happened to him before he came? Why was he only himself and not somebody else? He lay awake thinking about this. How was it he was himself inside this funny skin? How was it among all the millions and millions of people there was only one of him? And he was it. And he would lie there, clasping and unclasping his hands slowly and thinking, so this is me. And he would whisper, this is you, Fred. Then one night, it began. His left foot began to itch. He scratched. The more he scratched, the more it itched. I've got to flee, he thought. But it wasn't just one place, one bite. It was all over his foot equally, above and below, and right up to his ankle bone. After a while, his foot was so sore with scratching, he had to stop. He seemed to have got the upper hand of the itching for a while, and he went to sleep. And then here's one of the illustrations. Can you see? There's a goat tethered to a stake, and then this shadow. Nighttime in a field. He had a dream. In this dream, he was of all things a goat. Everything was dark, and he was a very frightened goat. He was a goat wanting to bound away, but a rope round his neck held him tethered. At first he couldn't see anything, but gradually, as if his eyes were growing used to the darkness, he began to make out branches above and stars. Then the post he was tethered to. He was in the middle of some sort of clearing among trees. And as he saw all this, he saw something dreadful. A lumpish black shape was moving, and he absolutely knew, it was something dreadful that was going to jump on him. He let out a wild, screeching bleat. But it was too late. The shape was in the air, and he was crushed by its weight. After that, a number of things happened at once. A dazzling light flooded everything, and he saw the massive striped arms of the giant beast that was bundling him up. Its jaws closed around his back, and he knew he was being picked up. At the same time, a sudden bang deafened him, and he was flashing through darkness, twigs and leaves lashing at him as he went, and with a mighty effort, he came awake. He was stumbling among scattered toys in his darkened bedroom, while his brothers shouted to him. When everything was sorted out and his father had been in to settle them down, it turned out that his eldest brother had heard him uttering the most ghastly, bleating cries. He had switched on the light and managed to get a glimpse of Fred fighting out of his bedclothes when the light bulb burst with a bang and everything went dark. In the darkness, Fred had scrambled into the far corner of the room. What a nightmare. But long after his two brothers had gone to sleep again, Fred lay wondering what had happened. Did the tiger escape with the goat? Had it carried him off into the jungle and eaten him? Had the hunter with the torch managed to wound the tiger with his shot? What happened to a goat that gets eaten by a tiger? As he thought these thoughts, Fred felt his left foot beginning to itch again. He reached down to scratch it and almost jumped out of bed with fright. He felt again more carefully. Then he climbed quietly out of bed and quietly opened the door. The light on the stairs was always left on for his baby sister, and it showed him quite clearly all he wanted to see. He put his left foot out onto the landing. Just as he had felt it to be, his left foot was covered with fur. But what horrified him most of all was that it was thick, yellow fur. He was too frightened to wake his parents, too frightened to wake his brothers. He crept back into bed and closed his eyes tight, praying to God to make his foot ordinary again. And so he fell asleep. In the morning, he was wakened by his brothers telling him of all the racket he'd made in the night, as if he couldn't remember it. The whole thing came back to him as if he'd been waiting at the side of his bed. Very cautiously, he felt for his left foot. He almost cried with relief. It was smooth, human, and normal. His own foot had come back. That day was a school day. In the bustle of the morning, he forgot about his dream. Then it was arithmetic first. He enjoyed school because he had invented a way of handling his lessons. One day he'd been daydreaming, his chin on his hand, his head screwed round, his gaze directed up into the sky through the topmost classroom window, when the maths teacher's voice had burst in his ears like a bomb. The blackboard was covered with figures and the teacher was staring at him alone. "I said, what are you dreaming about, Wilcox?" Fred stared. The class sat in hushed fear. The teacher, who was tall, bony... Actually, I'm going to show you the illustration again. Looks like a classroom with the teacher. dream coming out of his head. The teacher, who was tall, bony, with fierce black eyebrows and a savage, sarcastic temper, looked as if he might attack any second. "Tell us what you were dreaming. Was it something inspiring? It must have been something." Then, to his own horror, Fred heard himself saying, "I was an Eskimo, sir, and I'd killed a great whale, and me and my dogs had dragged it out on the ice, and I was skinning it with my walrus tooth knife." The maths teacher put back his head and laughed a false, big-toothed laugh like a jackass. Then his fierce eyebrows came back and he spoke in an icy voice. "In future, Wilcox, in my lessons, you are permitted to dream of one thing and one thing only." "Yes, sir." "Do you know what that thing is?" "No, sir." "You can dream you are Einstein, a genius mathematician, and instead of a whale, you will kindly drag this very real universe of ours out onto the ice. Do you hear that, Wilcox? For me, and you will skin the universe with numbers alone, Wilcox. Never mind your walrus tooth knives. You have only one tool in my lessons, Wilcox, and that tool is number. The most razor-sharp instrument ever invented by man." Fred stared, feeling stupid. The class sat silent, trying to make something out of what their explosive teacher had just said. The teacher smirked and went on with the lesson. But Fred was thinking, skinning the universe with numbers. That phrase kept coming back and it gave him a weird thrill. Skinning the universe with numbers. When they started doing their maths exercises, Fred invented a funny voice, which he thought would be like a genius mathematician's, and he invented imaginary spectacles and an imaginary potty look and started doing his sums. To his amazement, he could suddenly do them like magic, and they were all correct. After that, in maths, he always imagined he was this potty mathematical genius who was designing a spacecraft at home and which would be driven not by fuel, but by working out intricate maths problems. You just stuck a huge maths problem in the fuel slot. Everything would begin to whir, and the rocket would be off. When the answer shot out, you had to have another problem ready. You just fed in the problems, and all the business of the computers working them out was what drove the rocket. And as long as he imagined he was this potty genius in maths, his math lessons were strangely easy. Not only that, they were exciting. And there's his imaginary potty genius with the rocket fueled by problems. The maths teacher began to treat him with favour, as he soon had an important job in Fred's rocket system, which was spreading its station right through the galaxy. He had to think up problems that would take a rocket exactly to its destination without refuelling. He sat in a tiny room and simply invented problems. Fred had bigger things to think about. His rockets could now dematerialise and rematerialise in any one of 12 other dimensions. It was all done by mathematics. Each dimension was full of strange beings and events and laws. But it wasn't just maths. He discovered the same method worked for science and physics. In those, he was the genius inventor with the mad eyes, brother to the genius mathematician, and supplied all the gadgets and weapons needed in his rocket conquest of the 12 dimensions of the universe. In geography, he was a tireless explorer with skinny, steely legs and a brick red face and pale eyes and a very posh voice. cousin to the inventor and the mathematician. And for history, he simply switched his whole rocket system into a 13th time travel dimension. So, on this day, with all this, he forgot about his dream of the tiger until the end of the day. And then in the last lesson, the English teacher read them a story about of all things, a man eating tiger. A tiger in India had killed over 100 people, one by one, and eaten them. Now the hunter set out to kill it. As he listened, Fred sat in growing fear. The hunter bought cows and staked them out in the jungle at likely points, and on the first night the tiger killed one and ate half. Then the hunter built a platform in a nearby tree and sat over the half-eaten cow with his rifle, which had a powerful torch lashed alongside it. But that night, the tiger didn't come back to the cow as the hunter expected. Instead, it broke into a hut over 10 miles away and dragged out a woman and disappeared with her. So the hunter followed the blood trail and at last found the remains of the woman in a gully. Then, though it was a terrible thing not to take away the remains and bury them, the hunter sat up a tree over the poor woman's head and arms and legs until nightfall. Night came suddenly. Warning calls came from the jungle creatures. Fred listened in terror. He was listening for the tiger, and the tiger came. The hunter heard a long, low sigh and stared down into the pitch darkness. He levelled his rifle slowly and aimed towards the sound and then switched on the torch. At that moment, Fred shouted at the top of his voice, "Look out!" The whole class, which had been listening in tense silence, jumped and turned around. And here's an illustration of that Indian hunter in the night with the tiger. The teacher stopped reading. All eyes were fixed on Fred. "What in the Lord's name is the matter with you, Wilcox? Are you all right?" "Yes, sir." "Then what are you shouting about?" It was the tiger, sir." "And what were you trying to warn it, or what were you trying to warn it or something?" "Yes, sir." The class tittered. The teacher called for silence and read on. The hunter saw the tiger in the light of the torch and fired. With a crashing roar, the tiger leapt away into the darkness. Had he hit it? What had happened? Just then, the bell rang for the end of lessons and the whole class groaned. Oh! Fred ran all the way home, every now and then making great leaps, thinking about the tiger. I think I'm going to pause there because I think this is a 2-video book. Sorry about that. You'll have to wait. I'll put my bookmark in and I will finish the story tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Bye.